Five Live Boxing.
Welcome to the Five Live Boxing Podcast. It's a big one. A lot of fights, a lot of stories, and a decision that seems to have united people in despair. What a boxing weekend. I'm Steve Bunce. Get ready, strap yourself in. Now, in Glasgow on Saturday night, Josh Taylor won a split decision over Jack Catterall to retain all four of his light welterweight belts. It was a gruelling fight, but did the right man win? Robert Smith from the British Boxing Board of Control will join me to discuss the latest voting debate. And on Sunday night, at the O2, Lawrence Okolie retained his WBO Cruiserweight title after 12 hard rounds, and I'm not exaggerating. 2 cities, 2 champions, and 1 controversy that will run and run. This is not going to go away. Lawrence Okolie, by the way, joins me to look back and also to look forward. I'm joined by George Grove to talk over the fight, look at the facts, and hopefully to try and find some answers. George, what a weekend. Back-to-back nights of absolute lunacy, craziness in the boxing business.
What a weekend, Steve. We thought I had our work cut out Monday morning with a Saturday show and a Sunday show, and then they've thrown some controversy into it as well. But yeah, a lot of rounds to cover, a lot to talk about. It's divided opinion to a certain degree and also united, as you said.
It certainly has united people. The emails have been coming in and you can send them in. It's quite simple. It's 5liveboxing@bbc.co.uk and you can use the number 5 or you can spell it out. Five. It's your choice. 5liveboxing@bbc.co.uk. Now, let me get this right, George. Every single person I've spoken to thinks that Jack Catterall should this morning be the unified light welterweight or super lightweight or junior welterweight, whatever you want to call it, champion of the world. 12 grueling, hard, and sometimes frustrating, bloody, bad-tempered rounds with Josh Taylor. And at the end, a split decision, a decision that went against him. 3 scores. 1 score in his favour from Howard Foster, 113-112 to Jack Catterall, and 2 men voting in favour of Josh Taylor. Victor Lachlan from Scotland with 113-112, identical score, voting obviously for Taylor, and Ian John Lewis voting 114-111 for Taylor. First of all, George, what was your take? You watched it. I know you watched it delayed. How did you feel the fight unfolded?
So I watched it retrospect, knowing that there's a controversial decision at the end. But again, I like to be unbiased. I don't really want to have anyone else sway my judgment. And then once you know it's controversial, you're sitting down there with a pen and paper and you're scoring it round by round. Now that makes a big difference to the casual boxing fan, myself included. When you do it round by round, sometimes you come out with a fight that's a little bit tighter than what appears on paper. And it was a scrappy fight. There was a lot of rounds where, there was some foul play going on. There was this, there was that.
They both lost a point for illegal activity. One in the 10th round. Jack Catterall lost a point in the 10th round for hitting and holding. And at the end of the 11th, Josh Taylor lost it for a little slap in the stomach. So they both lost a point for illegal activity.
It's them early rounds which are kind of key. You assume before the fight starts that Taylor's the favourite. Taylor's going to, be bossing this fight. But Catterall is doing really well and he's picking up these rounds. But some of them are kind of tight at the start. So the first 4 rounds, I think I gave Taylor the second. The first 4, 3-1 Catterall. Now, Catterall started well. He then built into the fight in the middle rounds and seemed to really find his feet. It looked like he'd sort of buzzed Taylor in the first 20 seconds, or he'd caught him off balance and Taylor couldn't really get past that. Couldn't get into his rhythm, couldn't get going. The clash of styles where it was southpaw v southpaw, Catterall dealt with much better. He seemed much better prepared technically with a game plan for what was ahead of him. And we've heard Jamie Moore, the trainer, talk extensively about the preparation that he'd gone through to get to this stage, get for this fight. There's frustration from Taylor. There's heads are coming together. But I think, is it the 8th round, Steve, when Catterall puts a great combination together, and it's a cuffing shot.
And down goes Taylor.
And down goes Taylor. And now all of a sudden your ears are pricked up and you're like, well, these guys, he's picking up these rounds here and he's doing really well, but he's just put him over. Like, he could be on the verge of a stoppage here.
Yeah.
The point comes off for Catterall, but at this point you're thinking, well, it's by the by. And then with a round to go, Taylor hits him after the bell and he has a round off. He gets a point taken off. So he's sort of even the score there. In your mind, you're thinking Catterall can't lose this fight now. By the end, the last 2 rounds are kind of subjective, difficult to score. If you gave the last 2 to Taylor just because you thought he might have nicked him, I'll come out at 7-5 for Catterall. If you gave Catterall even one of the last rounds, then it's 8-4 with an extra 2 to 1 point advantage. He's a clear winner, really. Before the split decision, Steve, when it takes a long time for the MC to read the scorecards,
that's your cue. You know something's up.
You're like, okay, right, well, hold your breath. Something's happening. And each and every judge really gave it a little bit give it more in favour for Taylor than what the general consensus was elsewhere, So even the judge that gave it to Catterall gave it to him only by a round. So without the knockdown, it's an even fight. Yeah. So it was in Scotland, but I wasn't there. But you could hear the crowd. I'm not sure how one-sided it was. They would be behind their guy Taylor, but know that he's not performing. It's a real tough one. It's a real tough one to get by with, and my heart goes out to Jack Catterall because he's done everything that's asked of him. Jamie Moore, the trainer, explained it really well after. And said, look, he's waited 3 years for this, and this isn't a 10-week camp. This is a lifetime's work that's gone into this.
Here's some facts and figures for you. There were 10 rounds that the judges all scored the same way. They agreed on 10 of the 12 rounds, and this is the breakdown from the 10. One of those rounds was a draw. 4 of those rounds were for Catterall, and 5 of those 10 rounds that they agreed on were for Taylor. And then there was a split in the other 2 rounds. So, bizarrely, George, and some people might say, oh, he would say that, bizarrely, this was a fight that divided people. This was a fight that was open to interpretation. This was a fight that even though it seems to be universally acknowledged, everybody I've spoken to, everybody I've seen online, even allowing for some of the outrageous and disgraceful things that have been said, they all seem to believe that Jack Catterall did enough to win. I'm with you. 7-5 or 8-4. 7-5 or 8-4, depending on a couple of those last rounds. Incidentally, George, the last round was Taylor won the last round on 2 of the 3 scorecards. And in the 11th, which he also won, he loses a point. So that becomes a 9-9 round. So it's a little bit more complicated than some people are trying to have us believe. Now, before we speak to Robert Smith, George, let me ask you a question. Let me put you on the spot. What should happen now? Is there any chance of Catterall getting some kind of belated justice? Or if you had power, George, what would you make happen if you had power?
Firstly, I've got a little bit of experience here. What happens when there's a fight that sort of don't quite pan out as everyone everyone in the arena or everyone at home watching sort of feels it should have. And Robert, so when I boxed Carl Froch and there was a controversial stoppage, the scorecards were controversial. I don't have them to hand, but one judge had me only a round ahead, just so with the knockdown, that's a 50-50 fight and stuff like this. And the board sort of shrugged their shoulders and said, well, what can we do? A result's a result. It's by the by. Let's forget about it. And I can't really see them doing anything different now for Jack Catterall. My advice to him would be, don't let this go to bed. Keep kicking and screaming. Push for it. Put some public pressure on Taylor to get yourself a rematch. And people will say, oh, well, you're getting a rematch, or Taylor goes up and vacates. That's great because you'll be first in line for one of them belts. But Steve, I haven't run a marathon, mate. Have you ever run a marathon? Imagine finishing that marathon and then as you cross that line, the guy says, Do you know what? I forgot to time it. We're not going to count that one, but you can run it
again.
You can run it again next week, and you're thinking, I've trained an awful long time for this, and I've dreamt about this for an awful long time, and that is insignificantly comparable to what Jack Catterall has experienced weekend. He spent a lifetime, working for this dream. He's got a gift. He's got a gift that Josh Taylor's actually inherited, in that Josh Taylor's the unified. He has every belt, and if he beats him, he takes all his previous good work. That's by the by, that's boxing. But he's had that robbed from him, and it'll be tough for him to come again. It'll be tough for him to it left a big part of him in the ring on Saturday night. That's not to speak cruelly, because the same thing happened to me, and I know what it's like. He'll have to show a lot of character, a lot of resilience now to get up in the morning and go back to work.
Well, if there is a slight silver liner, and I take on board, and I agree fully with what you say, George, that he'll leave something in that ring that he'll never be able to recapture. And you talk from bitter experience. I do think that Josh Taylor will move up in weight, and this is not to offer being weight drained as an excuse, because we're way past looking for excuses. But I think Josh Taylor will definitely move up in weight. I think the 4 top belts have become vacant, and before we hear from Robert Smith, I'm convinced that all 4 of the sanctioning bodies will be desperate to get Jack Catterall involved, simply because he'll be viewed as the rightful champion. He'll be the man that should have those 4 belts this morning. That's not a slight on Josh Taylor. And so I think that he'll get an opportunity, and it'll be like a homecoming if he fights in Manchester. But I do take on board what you say, George, that the opportunity was there. That was the magic moment. That was the golden minute, the golden seconds, and he wouldn't have left a bit in that ring. I've spoken to people inside the Jack Catterall camp this morning, and there's obviously a lot of confusion, a lot of emotion, and they're working out what they're going to do and who they're going to speak to and how they're going to do it and what they're going to do moving forward. But I have done what I have to do here as a journalist. I've got Robert Smith, who joins us now. Robert, thank you so much for joining us. What were your thoughts and initial reactions on Saturday night in Glasgow?
My initial thoughts, and I hand on heart, I thought Jack nicked it, but it was a close fight. Some of the rounds were very close, going backwards and forwards. It was a scrappy fight. Didn't really get going in any other way than being a bit scrappy, but I suppose that can happen when you've got 2 southpaws, ultimately. But no, I thought it was close. As I say, hand on heart, I thought Jack nicked it. With regard to the scores, Howard and Victor, I can understand because it was tight. I am very surprised at Ian's score, and I can tell you now that we will be investigating that scorecard. And I've just spoken to the chairman. I've got to get in the process of getting a meeting organised.
And so does that mean that Ian John Lewis will be called down to perhaps answer some questions about how he came to the scoring in the particular rounds? Is that how that would happen?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
And Rob, there's an awful lot of screaming and shouting about, null and void the decision, reversing the decision. Just fill us in on legally what can and what can't possibly happen.
Well, can't change the decision. It's already been made. 2 judges went for Josh and the other one went for Jack. So I don't think there's anything in that. When these things happen, the word corruption comes up, etc., on a regular basis. You know these people as well as I do. It's not corrupt how they saw it. Whether you agree with what they saw is a different thing altogether. So that's what we need to investigate. But I do think it was close. Funny, I spoke to. This shows you how bizarre it was. I spoke to Johnny Nelson straight after. He thought that Jack won by 8 rounds. I spoke to Spencer Oliver, and he thought it was 3 or 4, and you and I thought it was about 2. So everybody's all over the place with regard to the scores. But it was a tight one. It was a good fight, but it wasn't the greatest fight, but it was a good fight. And Jack boxed fantastically, and Josh had a bit of an off night, and that's how it worked, as far as I can see.
And Rob, just quickly before I let George come in, Rob, there is a danger with this particular fight and this particular score and the level of outrage. And I'm going to use the word mock outrage because some people are talking about it and they admit they never seen it. They never even seen the fight. Is there a danger that is there a chance or a situation where the board will have to be quite quite proactive in containing this? Because otherwise this could get, I'll put it to you, Rob, this could get out of hand. This could become the death of boxing. It's corrupt. I'm never watching boxing again. I'm hearing and seeing headlines which are quite honestly quite shocking.
Yeah, I think that I'll put something out to the press later on confirming what I'm saying to you ultimately. The thing is, the word, as I said, we've already said the word corruption is used when things like this happen. It's not corrupt, it's how it's seen. But yes, we need to do something for sure. What that is, I'm not too sure at the moment, Steve. We've got to think about it. But the first thing is we need a full explanation, and I need to go through the scorecards one by one. Again, I haven't had the opportunity to do that. And I need to watch the fight from TV. I haven't had the opportunity to watch a full fight yet because obviously I only got back late yesterday. So all these things will be done before we have our meeting with Ian.
This is a question that crops up every now and again, and I've been involved in boxing 20 years, and I don't know the answer. And people say, well, how do you judge a fight? How do you win a round? Because obviously boxing's subjective, and I think that's why it's so popular. It splits opinions. It's not first past the post. But how... This is probably nothing to do with the fight weekend, but just from my own personal... How do you score a fight? How do you win a round?
Well, every round is a fight, really, ultimately. So when that scorecard goes to the referee and over to the supervisor, the judges start again for the next round. But obviously, it's aggression, it's punching of the right part of the glove, it's defensive work as well. So it's a combination of everything. As well as I do. When you see a fight, you generally know who's won it. And on the other night, as I say, I thought Jack nicked it, but I don't think it was complete robbery. I think he nicked it.
So to go back to the point you said earlier as well. So Ian John Lewis is his scorecards you thought were a little bit too wide, so you're going to check on that. What about if it was Steve Gray or someone else went the same decision wide? So you still got two judges versus one. I'm not pointing the finger at if there's anything suspicious about anything, because as you say, it's how people score and see a fight. But if there's two judges that you believe are a bit wide, then what happens? Is it still like, well, there's two v one? What can we do? Is to cause too much fuss, or do we then have to go a little bit further, a little bit deeper?
Well, I think on that one, we will get, each one of those officials is going to send me a report. I've received a couple already, and I'll get the other ones from the referee and from another judge. So we look at them and we see what they're looking at, see how they dealt with the fight themselves and compare it with the other ones. But, if you do get two scores and are wide for one particular boxer, you'd think they're seeing the same fight, aren't they? Ultimately, but so that's how it is. I mean, where do we go? Do we go to 5 judges? Do we go to 7 judges? How far does this go on to?
I know I'm not a fan of VAR. I'm not a fan of any. I like the system. I think the system works. I don't want to change the system. It's just if Ian John Lewis writes in and says, well, Taylor was pressing the fight. He was moving forward, backing off the front foot, and then Steve Gray says, well, he won the rounds because he was making him miss. His defensive work was fantastic. Or he landed more shots. But Taylor landed more heavier shots. Yeah. I don't know what the answer is to how win a round. So if I landed 30 right hands on the guy, but he lands 2 big right hands on me, and them 2 big right hands make my legs wobble a little bit, who wins the round? Is it the guy who did the most shots or the one who...
Look at the whole round, George. You see, from the beginning, a lot of people tend to forget what happened in the first minute of a round and maybe just remember what happened in the last minute of a round. So that's, so therefore you've got to look at the whole round. Who's bossing the contest, etc., is one way of looking at it. And as I said earlier, landing the cleaner shots, maybe doing the more work. If you've got a defensive masterpiece, then obviously you've got to take that into your thoughts as well. So it's subjective. That's the problem with the whole thing. It's subjective. I may look at something different than you would be looking at.
So Rob, when Ian John Lewis is called and in theory has to come down. Might there be a situation where you sit there with a couple of judges who weren't involved with the fight and watch the fight with him? So in addition to him, as George was saying, just saying, well, I thought in the second round, Josh Taylor did X or Y, you can actually sit down with him. So you've got the screen there, a couple of neutral judges and you and maybe someone else on the board. Would that be how the hearing could unfold?
Yeah, I mean, we keep mentioning Ian. That can happen to any official.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Certainly go through that. We had a referees meeting the other week going through things that have gone on in the last couple of years, etc. So, and we've obviously had scorecards being questioned before. We've had referees and judges appear before us before. We're not doing anything unusual here. It just happens to be a particular thing. And who knows? When I've looked at everything else, we may have to consider the other officials as well. So it's like, so, as I say, it's first thing on a Monday morning. I've got to have time to think about exactly what we're going to do. And I've got to report to my bosses and they'll advise me what they think they should be doing.
Well, a couple of years ago, there was a very odd decision. I actually agreed with it, but people were really upset with it. Manny Pacquiao against Jeff Horn and Vaco Parcasella, the WBO. I think he did something where he had three of his neutral judges judge the fight and see how they came up with it, to see if it disagreed with the scorecard that we got. I think the fight was in Melbourne or Adelaide, massive crowd. Listen, I thought Jeff Horn nicked it, but the Americans were screaming blue murder. Is that something that you would consider, or is that something that you already do privately now?
I genuinely will speak to a number of referees who've seen the fight on television, etc. Television, you do get, without being, how do I put it? You can be influenced by television, by commentators, etc. And so I generally watch a fight with the sound turned down. You lose a little bit because there's no crowd, but I'll certainly watch the fight with the sound turned down. And that does make a difference on your perception of a contest sometimes. And I'm sure you and I agree on that, Steve. We talked about it.
Absolutely.
But so, yeah, I've got no issue. I will speak to other referees and see what they thought. We're always looking to improve things. And that's what I got to do.
Robert, thanks so much for your time.
Maybe one day, Steve, we can do something positive about the sport. That would be what I would like to do. But I'm always doing things like this.
I try and do positive stuff every single Monday morning, but every now and again, the field of play changes, I can assure you. Rob, listen, thanks for your time and thanks for your honesty.
Cheers.
Now, George, I've had plenty of emails have come in, and they're basically along the lines of this one. This one's here from Joel Kirby from Portsmouth. And it's basically, long-time listener of the pod, the decision between Taylor and Catterall on Saturday left a horrid taste in my mouth. And he adds, my question is, how much longer does boxing expect to exist at the highest level in sport with decisions like this still taking place on such a huge platform? Well, those are decent questions, Joel. And this one, I like this one particularly, George. This one poses a couple of alternative ways. This is from Aaron in London. He suggests, I have a couple of suggestions. How about if you remove the judges from ringside? What if the judges were not at ringside, but instead in a studio? Think about the VAR referee in football. What say you to that, George? Having the judges remote somewhere when you're up in the ring?
I'm lucky enough to have been in the ring and know what it's like to have a fight, Steve, and sit literally on the ring canvas and watch a fight. And it's non-comparable, Steve, as you know, to watching it on a monitor or watching it in a screen. You won't get the full picture. I tried. I mean, we listened to Robert Smith there. I tried to get him to tell me how to win a fight. I'm 20 years in and I still don't know how to win a fight. And he can't give me an answer because it's subjective. It's what does this referee like at this particular moment? And part of that is to think and feel. You can feel the coping mechanisms of a fighter during the fight. You can see how heavy they're breathing. They might look like they're in full control, but they're not. And that will all play a part on how you're going to score the fight if Absolutely. That's the sort of judge you are. So I don't think that's a good idea. I don't really want to play with the formula of boxing, which is free scoring judges, for a championship bout. If it's just a fight, the referee can score the fight. Sometimes it's a referee and a judge or two, but the referee needs to do his job. It's a tough job, and the judges need to do their job. It's a tough job, and I wouldn't change that for anything, Steve. I think that works. I just think the only way forward would be a little bit more clarity on what is it? Do we actually want it to carry on being that subjective where we're never going to know? You're never going to know. Does this guy... we've had the Floyd Mayweather era when all of a sudden American people and American judges and fighters in particular are now appreciating the skill of making another fighter miss. I never quite bought into it, Steve. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I like the new wave of like the Saul Alvarez Canelo, where he wants to take your head off, and before
every second of
the
every
Roy
round.
Jones, the Mike Tyson's, these guys, this say you win a round. So, Mike Tyson's giving away 8 inches in height and reach to what some big heavyweight, and the heavyweight is peppering him with the jab, trying to get the odd right hand off. And then Tyson slips with 15 seconds to go in the round, hits him and buzzes his head with a big left hook. That's a Tyson round to me. That's how I'm scoring it. But now, who knows? Maybe they're like, well, no, actually, he was controlling the distance a little bit pretty good until that point where his legs went. So it's, Steve, we just don't know. And it's going to throw up these stinkers, from time to time. And as I say, when I sat down and broke it down round by round, I still had Catterall by minimum 2. It could have been 4, Yeah. And then a 7-5 decision from me, and I'm not a professional judge, and some other judge gives it 7-5 the other way. Well, how are you going to score the rounds? So we're a long way from the 120, 108 German scores that we used to see, 15, 20 years ago and stuff like that. But still, it's not fair. It's not nice. It's not great. There needs to be a better system. And maybe if there is just a little bit more clarity on about how do you win?
Well, if the system's in place, which is the right system, 3 judges at ringside who are members of the British Boxing Board of Control have got experience. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. And I understand that one man will see it one way, one man will see it another way. I understand that. But you're absolutely right. There needs to just be a little bit of transparency, clarity, whatever you want to call it. And we need to have that ability to sit down, whether it's just in an informal way having a coffee or whether it's in a formal way. Hey, listen, I'll be honest with you. What if there was, what if the British Boxing Board of Control put on a masterclass Saturday where members of the working media could go down and in 2, 4 or 5 hour sessions, we could watch films, we could have discussions and we could be educated. How about that? George, I want to go back to the email from Aaron because his second point is about live public scoring. He says, what if the scoring was visible to the crowd and the fighters after each round? Now, I have a strong opinion on this and I know you do too.
Again, I disagree. I don't think it's the right way to go because you're changing the play of the fight. So if I'm the fighter and I've won the first 4 rounds, but there wasn't a lot in them, and I'm 4 rounds up, then I'm like, well, what do I do now? I was expecting to lose the first 4 rounds or 8 rounds up, and I thought this is a 50-50 fight. I'm going to have to dig down the gum shield and put an empty the tank in these last 4 rounds. But it turns out I've actually nicked the first 8 rounds. All I've got to do is just see out to the end of the bell. That's not very good for the viewer, the spectator in the arena or at home watching on TV, because all of a sudden you might have 2 fighters who are going to go hell for leather to try and get the finish and try and get the knockout and get the win. But now you just got one guy who's holding for the last 4 rounds because he knows
he's in front.
He's just got to survive. So it will straight away shine a light on any dodgy decisions that are going on when it seems that, the fighter out the red corner is miles ahead. He's dropped him 3 times, but it turns out the fella in the blue corner is actually still stealing the fight. But we got a bit of transparency now, Steve. It's retrospective, so it's not great, but it's not hard to see the judges' scorecards. We always get to see the judges' scorecards. We live in an era now where everyone's opinion is heard.
Sorry, by the way, we never used to get them.
No.
I mean, we're not even 20 odd years ago, it was a battle to get the scorecards, especially in this country. I mean, there's some really controversial fights that I attended. Things like Ben and Eubank too at Old Trafford, I think 1993. It took me all night to get a glimpse at the scorecards. Literally 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, dodging between hotels in Manchester city centre, trying to put the scorecards together. So trust me, there was zero transparency then. There's a lot more now, at least.
You'll get a wave of narrative. So you've got the narrative of the commentators that you're watching, and they have to talk and in the moment, make their call. Sometimes they might miss something. Sometimes they might want to prove their point that they brought up earlier. They might just start to favour a fighter or get excited about something. So it's tough. And then once you've got the swarms that are coming through on Twitter and everything else, it's hard to then go against it. But I don't know, Steve.
George, that was Saturday night in Glasgow, but on Sunday night at the O2, the storm-damaged O2, you were in there at ringside, and it was Lawrence Okolie defending his WBO cruiserweight title for the second time against Mikhail Cieslak. We'll hear from Okolie in a second, but just tell me what you thought before we get Lawrence on.
It wasn't vintage Okolie. He made hard work of it. He was a clear winner. You know, I gave Cieslak a couple of rounds just.
You're being kind.
But yeah, if it was a shutout as well, it wouldn't be a screamer. Okolie dropped him because we know he's got that power, but he wasn't even really able to capitalize on it. I think he was just a little bit tense, tried a little bit too hard, focused a little bit too much on maybe just getting that knockout, and didn't do the prep time beforehand, because the guy in front of him was super tough. He was willing to roll around and wrestle with him all night long. He's still probably wrestling now in the hotel with someone else, but.
Easy. There's no need for that, George. Let me just point out, we've got no proof whatsoever that Mikhail Cieslak is wrestling with somebody else in the hotel room right now. We have no proof of that, but carry on anyway, George.
Well, I like to think he is anyway. It was a performance just where, he didn't get going. He just didn't. Yeah. He didn't really get going. He started off the wrong end. Do you know what I mean? He should have done a bit more prep work beforehand, and then looked to really put it on him. But first bell goes and he's trying to jump into range and he couldn't get the distance right. We get to Okolie will tell us what happens. Yeah,
we will indeed, because we know one thing about Lawrence: he is extremely honest and he will be forthright in his answers. And Lawrence joins us now. Lawrence, thank you very much indeed. I wasn't there. George was ringside. I watched it. Lawrence, it was hard. It was tough. How are you feeling this morning?
I feel broken. But it's part of the game, I guess. I feel blessed at the same time, and I feel highly motivated for the future. I'm honest with you, because I'm always honest with you, Steve. I kind of wanted to go out and make a great statement. There was a lot of hype, England versus Poland, Nigeria involved. I had AJ Adesanya out there, and I thought, I can get this over in the first, 3 to 5 rounds. Went for it, didn't come. The guy posed problems that I wasn't expecting. I don't want to, be one of those guys. I won, so I don't want to make excuses. But, I think there was a shadow of overlooking a little. I mean, you're actually one person that actually said something to me a while ago, where you said that there's a fighter I won't mention, but you said that he won the world title, he would do anything, whatever. He trained so hard, but then after, when it came to defending, he just was like, couldn't find that other gear, which is why I've always been asking for the best fights, the unifications, because those are the nights I could get up for. Fortunately, 4 weeks out from the fight, I see him in Roll Up, and I remembered, oh yeah, this is going to be a serious fight. So I managed to get the last bit of camp a bit more on point, so my weight was good. But hard rounds, I feel good, feel blessed, and I'm ready for what's next.
He was never going to make anything easy for you, Lawrence, was he? And I'm going to say this now, and you know the kind of stuff I'm going to say, and it's constructive stuff. Some people might think it's critical. There were moments there where your inexperience showed. Sometimes you did. Sometimes you got too involved. Sometimes you let him grab you too often. Sometimes you could have done different things with your feet, not necessarily with your head or with your fists. And that's not a criticism. That's an observation.
No, it's the reality. I'm quite a realist when it comes to boxing. I'm always trying to be better. I'm always putting myself in hard situations so that I learn. You know what I mean? Since I turned pro, I've been trying to find my level. Where is it? Who's going to probably be able to beat me? Who's going to be able to give me a hard fight? Yes, there was a hard fight, but I'm able to learn from it. The Glowacki fight, good fight, but all I learned is that I'm good at certain stuff. The fight after, what I learned is I'm good at certain stuff. So fights like this give me stuff to go and really work on. And as we said, if you're going to go into unification matches and stuff like that, this is a sort of seasoning that gets you ready for that. Do you know what I mean?
I think you're right. Watching it from ringside, there was definitely that element of you wanted to get that highlight reel knockout from the get-go, and then you tried a little bit too hard, I thought. It is tough. It is tough when you're sort of almost muscling your shots a little bit because you want that big shot, and then the guy in front of you is super tough. He wants to come in and hang off your chest and wrestle, and it wasn't vintage. That's what I said, but Also, it's 12 rounds banked. You know, your face looks clean. You know, it's not like you're all marked up around the face. Your body's going to be aching today because you've been wrestling. But that guy, he's no pushover. He's an elite level, strong guy.
Yeah.
Who, you know, and you know, you dropped him. He got up off the floor. You know, he took his licks, so to speak. And yeah, you know, I think it's one of them ones where you're still in that process of figuring stuff out. You know what you got, you know what you're good at, and sometimes it might just be, let's put it all together. I remember when you dropped him, I looked over. You looked to your corner. I always like to look at the corner and see what the corner is saying. And Shane, in your corner, said go to the body, and you came out and went straight for a right hand to the head. And I was like, right, Lawrence wants that knockout. The second time you buzzed him later on, like maybe the 11th, it was a whippy right hook that you came in straight away from the break, and a whippy right hook to the ribs. And I was like, right, now he wants to get rid of him. And he sort of, not learn a lesson in the early half of the fight, but you're like, I'm going to sacrifice that highlight reel win for something that's a little bit more clever in that respect, and then get rid of this guy because, you know, it's a tough night's work. It was a physical night's work. But, you know, it was as Steve says, I think it's a great learning fight, and you are going to struggle for motivation at times because you've kicked on your career so quickly, world champion, you know, after only a handful of fights, and there's so many big opportunities out there for you, but it's a waiting game for them. I mean, I was excited to see Breeder Stare last night. That's a fight that I'd love to see you have. And I will say that I've got a bit of bias towards you because I've seen you in the gym and you're a Brit and I like you. So I think you've got the capability of beating him, but that's certainly one where you'd have to show up and perform and get the tactics right. And maybe that'll be who you are, bud. Like maybe the tougher the opposition, the more you have to rise to the occasion, the more switched on and concentrated you are, and the better the performances are.
I think so. I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, Shane, you know Shane already. He was already telling me what we got to work on, and it's all application for me as well. There was moments in the fight I felt like, you know, I was jabbing, boxing brilliantly, and then other moments where it wasn't that. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's all about application and what we've worked on. But also, I'm the type of person that needs to spar it into myself, like in the preparation to the fight. So it's all good. Like I said, so much. I feel really happy to have had a fight like that. Now, and if I'm once again going to be honest again, I just think, obviously, as you said, having these type of fights at this stage, obviously, I don't think it's too early for me because I'm winning, but it's like most people don't really take those type of risks.
You're absolutely right. You know, you're doing things now, and this is the modern sport we've got because of guys that have come from Olympics and Worlds and Europeans. You know, you guys are, you know, like Josh Taylor the night before you. You guys are all at different. You're at stages that traditionally fighters didn't get to. So you're having to, and it seems like a contradiction in terms, you're still learning on the job. And there was a great line you used afterwards in the interview, Lawrence. You said, I need to work on the mentality that it doesn't have to be perfection. And that's absolutely true. It doesn't have to be perfection every time. Sometimes, and you continued, I can just touch him with a jab. And that's sometimes what was needed yesterday. Nothing complicated, just a bit of distance and a good jab and a pause. Because that's stuff you learn. And you learn that, as you say, you can spar that into you, but you can also get it from hard, grueling 12-rounders like that.
No, it's definitely the case. It's so weird because I always see fighters after fights say, this and that happened and I could have done this. And I was thinking, well, why didn't you? And then I was about to think, okay, it's different on the night, you know what I'm saying? But it's definitely something that I'll be working on. But once again, like I don't want to be too hard on myself, do you know what I mean? I'm obviously my own harshest critic, and it will help me in training, which is the most important place, and then for my next fight. But as for the night, you know, I got a ring walk with Adesanya and Joshua. Yeah, one of the of my life, because it kind of just it really showed me what I've actually accomplished and I'm accomplishing right now. You know, I grew up working at McDonald's, becoming a world champion, becoming sort of like recognized not just by the fact, recognized by peers, and I can call world champions my peers, and it's amazing. Do you know what I mean? It's truly amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a fairy tale entrance last night, Lawrence. You're right, and the fairy tale does continue. Let's bump it up. Are you thinking? Did I get you straight last night that what you do now is let your body recover and then have a fight up at heavyweight, and then if the real fights can be made at cruiser, come down at cruiser? Is that the plan, Lawrence?
I think so. I think it really depends on how quickly they can get me out next. I think once I'm in camp, like, back to back, like, let's say I have a couple weeks off and I'm back in training, it's easier. Like, fights keep on getting pushed back, postponed. I naturally just get bigger and bigger. And I eat quite clean. I eat a lot, but I eat quite clean. But the weight just piles on. So I might have a little showdown at heavyweight just to kind of keep myself ticking over until a unit can happen. I just think it's hard. Like, obviously, this fight will teach me to obviously always stay switched on in training and push, because look, this guy came to have his night. Now, I'm happy that I won well, but he came to have his night. So I think I need more challenges. As we were saying earlier, the main thing I've always done is push myself. I want to get to Olympics. I want to be British. I want to be world, and that always keeps me motivated. So I won the world title. The first thing I'm saying is unification, because I know what kind of person I am. So if I can't get unification next, let's have a heavyweight showdown. Let's see where I have to show, hey, I can't get in there and have a grappling match because these guys are bigger and stronger. So I have to use my feet, have to pause, have to show other stuff. So let's have some fun.
Let's have some fun indeed. Lawrence, listen, thank you for joining us. And you just say, don't be harsh on yourself, because you went in with a guy that had never been stopped, who came with a good reputation, who packed the place with some of his fans, and you got 36 priceless minutes, 12 priceless rounds. Lawrence, top stuff. Speak to you very soon. Enjoy your food, and enjoy yourself for a couple of months. See you soon.
Ta-da. Have a good one.
So, George, Lawrence Okolie there. As I said, we knew he'd be honest. But what do you want, George? In 20 seconds, what do you want for Lawrence Okolie in the next year?
Well, I'd like to see him try and unify the cruiserweight division. I want to see him up at heavyweight, and I think he's still got a little bit of work to do technically before he gets up there. But his style, he could be a more accomplished Deontay Wilder. Big, tall, lean, crazy power. He's talking about having a little tick-over fight at heavyweight, which I think he should do. It's a unique situation, Steve, that only the cruiserweights can just be a world champion and just have a little knockover fight at heavyweight. You can't do that in the super middleweight division, Steve. I could just pop up to light heavyweight and not defend the super middleweight belt to have a little run out. You can do that in the cruiser, take advantage of that, and then come down. And the Breedis was there. He's dressed as Super Mario. He's got McDonald's. He wants that fight. I mean, let's have it.
Yeah, a more accomplished Deontay Wilder might just be in a packed show, the quote of the show. What a pod it's been. I knew it'd be a busy one. I knew it'd be a long one. Thanks to Robert Smith from the British Boxing Board of Control for coming on and talking to us about the decision on Saturday night in Glasgow. It was controversial and it's not going to go away. Jack Catterall is not the unified world champion, but Josh Taylor is. And I tell you what, Josh Taylor is still a great fighter. And thanks to Lawrence Okolie for talking to us about his grueling and grappling fight on Sunday night at the O2. It was a hard fight to watch. It was a hard fight to win, but Okolie will be a better fighter for those 12 rounds. Thanks, of course, for George Groves for being my partner on what's been a very long journey during this podcast. And thanks for you for being loyal, and thanks to all of you for downloading this boxing pod. It's been the 5 Live Boxing Pod with me, Steve Bunce. Speak to you next week.
Let's get ready to rumble!
5 Live Boxing.